Thank you, Madam President. I support Andrew McDonald. Um, I've known him for a while. We even share the same birthday, um, which is not why I'm supporting him. Uh, I've been listening to the debate today. I think it's an important debate. But honestly, after listening to this debate, I'm confused as to how I'm ever supposed to judge as a person who sits in front of the judges that come in front of us at the Judiciary Committee, judge them. I have absolutely no idea what I'm supposed to be doing. This debate has taken me backwards and forwards. And I actually wish that this body would be as intentional about what we do with every judge that comes through here as we seem to be about Andrew McDonald. I think everybody in this circle by now knows that there have been many times that I have come in front of, whether it was down in the House or up here in the Senate, come in front of these bodies talking about issues with the judges we have, not every judge, not even close to every judge, but the judges we have in the state of Connecticut. And what I've been told is what you've heard a little bit about. Well, you can't second guess the judgment of these judges in the cases. And even when it's not about that, because I moved off of that years ago, that's how long it's been going on. Even when I moved off of that and have looked at the comportment of the judges, have looked at transcripts, we get told about the careers that these judges have. We don't get talked to about what happens in the court and how it affects the people of the state. Today, during the debate, we heard about two judges, and one had 3 years left to go, and one had become a JTR, a judge trial referee. And that's why we voted for them to keep going forward. That had nothing to do with what happens in the court. And somehow today we come here and we have Justice Andrew McDonald in front of us. And Justice Andrew McDonald is in front of us, and there's a lot of talk about why Justice McDonald should not be sitting there as the Chief Justice. Quite frankly, I don't understand this because I haven't heard anything to this point which says to me he should not be the Chief Justice. I've heard things to say I don't agree with Andrew McDonald's decision. I've heard things to say I might have a couple of questions about Andrew McDonald, but we have had people who have come before us, and yes, they're not the Chief Justice, who don't deserve to be on the bench, no matter where they currently sit. That's the decision this body has made. But we're going to stop this man from being a Chief Justice because, I don't like what he said there. I don't like the fact that by keeping his mouth shut, he said some things about the death penalty. By keeping his mouth shut, he kept his mouth shut. I don't like the fact that Andrew McDonald, some people in this chamber have put themselves forward as seers. They knew what the future was going to be. They knew that when we made the decisions that we made, that the death penalty ultimately would be rendered unconstitutional. I don't like the fact that Andrew McDonald, sitting there, ruled on the constitutionality and agreed with me because I said that was the thing that would happen because the courts would have to do it because that's the only way you can interpret the Constitution. I don't understand what we are saying here today. And I want to talk about the death penalty because I know a lot about the death penalty. Because as many people in this circle know, I came here in 2009. And when I came here in 2009, I had a mentor. His name was Bill Dyson. He was this person sitting in a seat in the 94th district, and I succeeded him. And Dyson had worked a long time on the death penalty. And the thing I decided was, I'm going to pick up that issue. I'm going to talk about that issue. And I'm going to take that issue and move it over the goal line. Now, if you were here at the time, you know people actually laughed in my face. Had never gotten out of the committee and passed through one of the floors. Well, we did it that year. And I think it's interesting that I heard earlier one of the knocks on Andrew McDonald was that he couldn't quite recall some instances that happened. But I heard Senator Kissel, the vice chair of the Judiciary Committee, talk to us about what happened with the death penalty. And he told us in 2009, we had the death penalty bill come before us. And, that bill went to the governor and it fell because the governor vetoed that bill. And then the Pettit issue happened. And then 2012, but that's not what happened. That's not what happened. And so we're knocking Andrew McDonald because he can't quite recall the facts. But one of the most important things that has happened in this state, particularly with us sitting in the legislature, cannot be recalled by the person who's knocking him for that. What actually happened was in 2009, I showed up here, we did a lot of work, and we had a bill that got out of the House and out of the Senate for the first time in the history of the state of Connecticut. It went to the governor. I sat down with the governor, had conversations with her. She agreed with everything I said. Some people may not believe that, but some reporters asked her and she would not answer. She agreed with everything I said, but decided she was still vetoing the bill. And so we came back trying to figure out what were we going to do. We had a bill in 2011. We knew we weren't going to move that bill, so we pulled off the bill. In 2009, Andrew McDonald was the chair of the committee, Judiciary Committee for the Senate. Michael Lawler was the chair for the House. My conversation was really with Michael Lawler and my leadership. In 2011, my conversation was with Andrew McDonald, I'm doing a bill, and with Mike Lawler again about the contents of that bill. We pulled back. In 2012, my conversation wasn't really with Andrew McDonald because it just wasn't how it worked. It was with Mike Lawler. And the conversation also took place with the governor's office. And the conversation also took place with another person, the person that was the president at the time of the Senate. Because we were trying to figure out how we were going to get this done. Because it was obvious that because of what happened with Pettit, not in 2009, 10, or 11, but in 2007, but what happened with Dr. Pettit's family, many members here who might otherwise vote to abolish the death penalty would not. And so we came up with a strategy which said, maybe we could do this prospectively. That's how that came about. Andrew McDonald wasn't the architect of that. He wasn't. Didn't have conversation with Andrew McDonald. And as we've heard earlier, he didn't have any public pronouncements. So he had no public pronouncements. He did what people who are the seers in this chamber said we should do, as somehow we're saying, Andrew McDonald, you shouldn't be the Chief Justice. You want to talk about time? Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. How long was he on the Supreme Court? We don't have to ask that question. His time on the court was about 2 years, D.C. Circuit Court. And then he went to the Supreme Court and became the Supreme Court Justice. So the time, to me, is completely irrelevant. And what I'm hearing from some of my colleagues is, well, maybe he doesn't really need to be the Supreme Court, the chief at the Supreme Court, but he could stay on the Supreme Court. Somehow we're trying to make the argument that he operates in an unconstitutional way and he doesn't regard when he should recuse himself, but maybe he should stay on the Supreme Court. To me, that seems to be an argument that says that you don't want him on the Supreme Court. I don't understand how we do that. We have turned ourselves into pretzels so that we could oppose Andrew McDonald. I don't understand what we're doing here. And I don't care whether you're a Democrat or Republican. That really matters not to me. What matters to me is, what do we do with our justice system? What do we do when any judge, and yes, the Supreme Court and the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court matter, but what do we do when any judge comes in front of us? What do we do? And I can't figure out what it is we do. I can't figure out what the through line is here. This makes no sense to me, and I sit in this building. I can only imagine what it means to the people outside of this building. You might as well just throw it up in the air, and wherever it falls, that's what happens. Passionate about it because I sit as an outsider in many ways. One of the people who I respect the most in historical context is James Baldwin. And James Baldwin said, precisely at the point when you begin to develop a conscience, you must find yourself at war with your society. I would tell you this. Those who are outsiders always have that conscience. They're always awake. They always find themselves there. And the issue with being the outsider oftentimes is that when you realize that the people with the power are not taking into account the reality of the other, you realize that they're not taking into account your reality. Yeah, we could talk all we want about the reasons why there's a good reason to oppose Andrew McDonald. I still haven't heard it. There's a very good reason why there are several very good reasons why we should support Andrew McDonald. One, he's qualified. That's the first reason. But two, those people who see themselves as outsiders, who no matter what we say, unless we give them some really good reasons, those people look at this process and say, I'm never going to be able to be in that position. So I would say to you that if you're voting against Andrew McDonald, you had better come up with a really good reason, not a kind of reason, not a maybe reason. You had better have a really good reason, not I don't agree with Andrew McDonald. many people here know that there's a saying about politicians. We all want to move up. You want to know one of the reasons why that's not something I'm looking at currently? Because I'm one of the others. And even in the year 2018, as one of the others, as someone who's traveled around this state that thinks of itself often as a very progressive state, I know better. It's my reality. I've been in this building for years talking about the reality I see, and people tell me that the things that I've seen, I'm 44 years old, for 44 years in my life are not real. All of that matters today. Every last bit of that matters. I have 4 children, an 18-year-old, a 12-year-old, and 2 newborns. I don't know what they turn out to be. I know they're black, right? We know that. But I don't know what they turn out to be in terms of their sexual orientation. I hope someday they look at the state of Connecticut and they say, in the state of Connecticut, I can be anything. And I hope that when we're finished here today, what we do has nothing to do with potential for them looking at the state of Connecticut and saying, well, that's something I can't be. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator. We remark. Senator Cassano.
Thank you, Madam President. I really had no intention of speaking